Welcome to the Antidōt Podcast. Life is just too short to be spending your precious gift of time in this world held back by anxiety and fear and worry, stuck in those limiting mental loops, replaying the past, worried about the future, doom scrolling through the social media loops and the news again and again, just trying to escape yourself. Well, fortunately, there's so much you can do to solve this stuff and rewire your brain and your life without pills or apps or elaborate meditation practices, just using a combination of cutting-edge cognitive approaches and helped by evidence-based nutrition and supplements. Much of it is surprisingly little known. So on the Antidot Podcast, we bring some of the world's most impressive experts, practitioners, and thinkers in their fields to uncover new ways to reboot your brain and optimize your experience of life beyond what you thought was possible. Antidot is 100% free, so be sure to subscribe to this podcast so that you don't miss an episode, and also check out the Antidot website for the latest breakthroughs, instantly calming quick reliefs, free Antidot weekly newsletters, and much more at www.theantidot.com. That's antidote spelled without the E at the end. www.theantidot.com. Welcome to the Antidot Podcast. It is rare that we get to talk about a true game changer for anxiety and racing minds and feeling out of control. Today is one of those days, and I could not be more excited to talk about something that is brand new and based in real science. Gary LeBlanc is our guest, and Gary is the founder and CEO of ZeroDB. ZeroDB is a new line of functional organic beverages that helps people to quiet the noise in their lives. It is 20 to 25 times more effective than CBD and based on over 20 years of real neuroscience. Okay, we're going to go into that quite a bit. Prior to ZeroDB, Gary has an impressive background. He's been in senior roles in operations and strategy at tier 1 consumer packaged goods companies. And he has been living his true life recently as what he calls a life engineer. He's also the founder of a book called Find Your Superhuman,
Mm-hmm.
and it has an upcoming online course coming out. Gary, welcome to the show. I could not be more excited to talk about what you're doing.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it. I was looking forward to this all week, and now with this background, it's so peaceful to talk to you. It's incredible.
I'm somewhere in the Maldives. We don't know where exactly. So Gary, it is so fascinating what you're doing. You and I just got connected recently through complete happenstance. And I swear sometimes the serendipity of these connections is just uncanny. When I heard that, someone was making actually a brand new drink for anxiety, right? And quieting your mind, my ears perked up right away. But when I went down the rabbit hole a bit and learned just about the hardcore science behind this and all the research, and that this is based on something that has been so little utilized so far because it's so new, the endocannabinoid system. So we talk about things like CBD. There's a lot of marketing hype about CBD, right? But most people really don't understand that we're talking about an entire system, and that things that are normally known as CBD or have CBD in them, most people have found are just simply not effective, right? We've all tried these CBD things for anxiety and worry and racing minds that just they don't do much. What you're doing is entirely different. So I'd love to start by just an overview. So first of all, what is ZeroDB and what is the core premise behind it?
Yeah, ZeroDB was I guess you could say the confluence of two different things happening at once. Back in my old life, I had developed two organic functional beverages. Okay, one was for energy, one was for calm. And really, it's important because I've always kind of pushed back against reductionism. I'm always looking into more full spectrum solutions, meaning we take the whole constituent of the plant, which is very important to me and very important to our pharmaceutical partners who we met, which sounds a little bit of an oxymoron, having a pharma partner actually look at full spectrum natural solutions. But what we did was, when we started to reverse engineer their research, which was in the neuropsych pathways. So basically they were looking into the neuroscience behind how all these natural chemicals and cannabinoids we've evolved with for millions of years. So as obviously not as humans, but as organisms, cannabinoids have been part of this evolution for millions of years. And essentially what they do is they have a lot of functionality in certain neural pathways that help to modulate anxiety. So essentially, their research was into looking at where do these chemicals, all these branches of cannabinoids, all these over 100 cannabinoids, which receptors, which pathways do they work in? And through their pharma-based research, we ended up saying, well, what if we reversed engineered some of that research and looked at plants that contain these beautiful compounds? And that's where ZBD was born. We basically took the functional organic drinks we had, one for energy, one for calm, and said, what if we had a real science-based foundation? And that foundation is this super extract we call 0DB. And it's multiple different plants, non-cannabis plants, that contain these cannabinoids. And since we have the family of cannabinoids, again, I mentioned full spectrum, since we have the family of cannabinoids, we can better bind to these receptors in these pathways to really amplify the effects of them working in this beverage. And that's what we found. And in the research, they were orders of magnitude more effective, these family of compounds, these families of cannabinoids, at modulating what we needed to versus CBD. So that's truly where 0DB came from. That was a bit of a long answer, but there's a lot of science behind it.
No, that's perfect. There's so much to unpack there. I hope people really appreciate just how groundbreaking what you just said is. Again, people sort of associated, CBD with being the only sort of cannabinoid related thing that you could take that could maybe, affect your, calm, your mood, anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. What you were saying is this is a non-cannabis based system. And what you're pointing at here is that this endocannabinoid system in our bodies, there's over 100, right, of these identified receptors, right, in our bodies that can be modulated or affected. And it's not just the cannabis plant that can affect them. As you'll see in the ingredients in your drink, you have all kinds of plants, natural plants in there, the extracts from these plants that are done in a certain way to modulate these receptors that in concert, in synergy, create an anti-anxiety effect on your brain. They're basically quieting the anxiety nerve. Is that right?
So there's a few things I can unpack there. So one, cannabinoids work in the body on multiple systems. So not just the endocannabinoid system. So there's over 200 different receptors in the body that cannabinoids can deal with, right? And there's over 100 cannabinoids. Now, cannabinoids, unfortunately, the name kind of tethers it to cannabis. But like I said, there's over 100 plants with these family of compounds, right? And what happens is they work in each pathway, they'll work differently, and the research that we based our drink on was analyzing a specific pathway that looks at a chemical where all of these different disorders will go through, right? So the research we had with our pharma partner, which is protected, we actually had a platform, a bioassay, where we could measure the quantitative activity of our super extract, which again, to your point, is multiple different plants, specific dosages in concert working together to get that 20 to 25 times effective.
I see. That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that too. You're right. There's 100 or more identified cannabinoids, but over 200 receptors in the body. Thank you for clarifying that. And specifically for anxiety, there are very specific pathways that have been identified that can modulate the anxiety related parts of your brain, right? In layman's terms, right? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of deep science in there, which again would potentially kind of blind people. But the basic premise is these chemicals work in the body to produce these outcomes. And really the trick was in the bioassay, the platform, we were able to measure in those specific pathways the activity. And really that's the magic bullet. I don't want to disparage anything. I think the cannabis plant is an incredible plant. I want to highlight that. However, if you had a parking lot with a bunch of different sized parking spaces and all you had was a tank, right? And you tried to park a tank in each one of those, well, that might not necessarily be that effective. But what if you had 10 different sizes of cars that park nicely into those parking spots. That's kind of like the analogy that I use for CBD. Yeah, it's an effective compound, but since it's only one compound working ineffectively, you're throwing a lot of it in the body. And that's where you get the potential liver issues with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? You're kind of throwing a lot in the body that you don't need to. And that's why we believe our solution, we've kind of finessed it a bit more so that, it's a more effective formulation.
I see. And what's so really incredible about this is that the real science, I mean, you worked with a true pharma company, was able to do, empirical quantitative research with these bioassays, or, NSA basically,
exactly.
That's for a panel, to measure quantitatively the very specific impact of these endocannabinoids on the anxiety parts of your brain, right? In simple terms, right? So there's actually receptors in the brain. People who are a bit more geeky might know that there's the CB1 and CB2 receptors in the brain. There's all kinds of identified pathways that actually affect anxiety. And this is where, for example, when you take certain substances, whether it's natural, herbs or other things, cacao, chocolate, other plants, affect these different receptors in various ways. This is very different, though, from affecting what has been one of the other approaches, which is the GABA system, the GABA system. People basically take benzos, with sort of like Xanax type thing, or alcohol, or other things that basically have a marked effect on the GABA system. This is a completely different pathway, which is also really great because these GABA-based solutions out there, of course, are very, very problematic for a lot of people, right? If you combine them with alcohol, or there are rebound effects. So this is literally going in on a completely different pathway to affect these very specific receptors in your brain that modulate anxiety, and really are modulating your fight or flight response. So it's, your amygdala in your brain is being affected directly by these things via this non-cannabis based collection of plants that have been specifically modulated or created to produce this effect. And that's just groundbreaking.
Yeah, it's really the beauty in it. And the difficulty was in that decoupling from the cannabis plant, because really from a functional perspective, these compounds are beautiful compounds that we find in so many different plants. And you could have the same plant, the same strain, but depending on where you grew it, depending on how you extracted your functional components, all of that affects specifically what that chemical profile will look like. Think of it like a stereo equalizer. So it's like, if you don't have the way to measure this in platform, then you're kind of guessing. It truly is a needle in a haystack, because it is the combination of all these plants that have that beautiful activity. That's what we're super excited about.
Right. That's really, really interesting because, for example, you might read the ingredients in your drink and say, oh, it looks like there's some licorice root extract in there, or some other plants. You might think, oh, well, I guess licorice must be good for anxiety. No, that's not. It's not quite so simple, right? So it sounds like what you've done is you've identified these very specific versions or types of these plants, the specific extracts, and within the extracts, even the specific components of the extracts that are going to produce this very direct effect in a measurable way on the anxiety modulators in the brain. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how it was put together. It was specific to the strain, specific to the extract. And again, if you're an ops person or a supply chain person, you want to have redundancy. But when you have beverages like this, it's very precise. And we have 13 different nutraceuticals in our Plus Energy 0DB, and we have 8 in our original. So these aren't just simple beverages, simple sparkling beverages. These are, and again, they taste great. You'll see, Paul, in a couple of weeks. But they were truly designed, to all be working together, and really everything in there is there for a reason. Even the non-super extract component, that quieting the noise component, all of the other extracts we put in for the calm and for the Plus Energy, those are all put in there at therapeutic dosages as well. So everything's been well thought out.
What's really incredible too is that the care and rigor and science and detail that you and your team, including the experts that you worked with on the pharma side, to create an all natural drink like this, right? That
Hmm.
doesn't have medications, artificial stuff in it,
Hmm.
is really incredible. And just the thought, you can see from talking with you and looking at the ingredients, every single component is there for a reason. And yet also this thing is designed to just taste great, right? I mean, it's like literally something like you could drink instead of a Red Bull, or
Oh
something like that.
yeah,
In fact, it's
which I
it's
am.
kind of
Yeah.
the anti-Red Bull in a way, right? It's like, you're, if you want to calm down, you're getting ready for a stressful meeting at work, you're feeling anxious and out of control, you're kind of worried about something coming up,
Mm.
to be able to drink one of these and sort of know that you're drinking something that is based on all natural plants extracts in there, but they've been selected to produce this anti-anxiety and calming effect and clarifying effect in your brain. This is the first time there's been a drink like this out there. There's nothing else like there on the market. Is that right?
Yeah, you know what? There isn't anything like this on the market. What you see on the market right now is a lot of, again, some of them are hemp seed extracts, some of them are hemp extracts, some of them are CBD, which again, CBD, there's a patent on it with Epidiolex. So again, you're not supposed to be able to have pure CBD in a beverage, right? So there's these different solutions, which again is all about the cannabis plant, right? Hemp and marijuana, they're both cannabis plants. And again, hemp seed is different from hemp extract. So really, this is the only beverage that really steps out and understands, one, how that system works, and two, how to find a better way, a safer way, a more effective way to do it. And and truly for us, I, I consider this, and I don't want to get into the philosophical side of it too much, but really, 0DB is a catalyst, right? Our tagline's quiet the noise. I don't believe a beverage should be your solution in life to quiet the noise in your life. And by quiet the noise, I'm talking about, that internal chatter, our default mode network while we're either in the future or the past. What we want to be is we want to be a catalyst. So we want to be that eye in the hurricane, that 2 to 3 hours where you can down regulate, take a deep breath, and do the real work to be able to see things clearer. Because right now, when you're stuck in that, you mentioned earlier, the fight or flight mode, the sympathetic nervous system all geared up, you're really not thinking straight, right? All that noise, it's kind of like a signal to noise ratio. There's a lot of noise and you're not seeing things quite clearly. We're the catalyst. And then what we want to provide is really the anchor, is we want to provide other solutions through our content to help people do the deep work to quiet the noise. Because ideally, humanity wouldn't need a 0DB. But unfortunately, humanity needs it very much. And that's what we're trying to work on.
I'm so glad you brought that up. One of our central, the pillars of what we're doing with Antidot and the Antidot website and all the content there is precisely around that point. Ideally, we shouldn't even need an exogenous or an external thing, a product, a food, even natural foods do this stuff. Ideally, we should be able to, with our own minds, and it is very doable and possible to do that. And that's kind of why we're here doing what we do, to leverage, the wisdom from both, the ancients, Stoicism, Buddhism. There's all kinds of wonderful historical thinking on this. It goes back thousands of years. That is really also the foundation behind modern cognitive behavioral therapy. You, with your own brain and your own mind and the choices you make in your life, should be able to quiet this stuff and be able to get to a place where you don't have these racing out of control thoughts. It is absolutely doable. In our modern life, though, as you said, it is so difficult. We live on screens. We don't sleep well. All the dopamine, we could go on and on and on. So to have something like your drink and a solution, especially a natural one like this, without the side effects and risks of liver challenges and all that, to be able to just take the edge off. And I love your name, 0DB, to lower the volume down to zero so that you can do that work. That is part of a holistic approach to this. And I know that's where your orientation is coming from, right? In your broader work, your book, your courses, what you're trying to do
100%.
with your mission. And I love that you're not just doing a product for profit, for product's sake, to try to make some kind of marketing gimmick or some kind of thing. We're very averse at Antidot to sort of, marketing for marketing's sake and woo
Right.
and there's so much CBD marketing crap out there. And so, we're very selective about what we talk about. Most of the things we talk about are basically using natural, plants and things like that in food
Right.
as an augment to the mental work you have to do to become grounded again and rewire your brain. I love that is the DNA behind what you are doing. And you're using this drink, as you said, as a catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
How great is that?
It's look, being totally frank with you, I grew up with crazy anxiety. I stuttered till I was 12, 13, and this isn't a sob story. It's just reality.
Join the club.
The weird things our brain does, it's unfathomable. Like, without getting too much on a tangent, I can't remember stuttering in an instant. So my brain has blocked that out. But I know I stuttered persistently throughout my childhood. So, I grew up with this anxiety. And for the past 7 years building Ikuma, really what I always got drawn to was the content, was the writing, was the life engineering. And the reason I got into it, my background's engineering business, but my friend passed of cancer, his picture's up on my bookshelf. That was finally, I kind of hit that point in life where the douchebaggery of CPG and being a VP for a company and, not having the money worries and all this, eventually you realize that it's not making you quote unquote happy, or fulfilled is a better word. So this truly was, a huge, call it inertia behind me needing to deal with these things and figure this out for myself. So when you say it came from that, it truly did. Like, we designed something that helps me, right? And that helps a lot of people, right? So I do appreciate the fact that, it's the deep work that I'm really jazzed about.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that's deeply personal. I said join the club because I dealt with the same stuff myself.
Oh, did you?
Of course, hence the whole, yeah, absolutely. That's why we're doing Antidot. Those who come to Antidot as well, it's the same story again and again and again. People dealing with these things and looking for solutions. And the unfortunate thing, and it was something we're trying to solve, and I know you are too, is people too readily will go to a pharmaceutical solution, or they go to a psychiatrist or doctor, not knocking doctors or psychiatrists or medication at all. It has its place, absolutely. And particularly in some cases, in some people, it can be life-changing, absolutely game-changing. It can provide a level of stability. So we want to be very careful about that. But the thing is, unfortunately, they can be problematic. They also conk out, they poop out. If you're on an SSRI, so many people have found after being on these things for years or getting into medication that either the side effects or the fact they stop working or that they become more reliant on them, they don't solve the root problem. And so often the root problem is something that you can actually solve with your own brain, your lifestyle, with how you sleep, how you eat, etc. And the purely cognitive approaches, and it's a real life, changing moment when you realize just how powerful your own brain is at getting through these things and resolving them. So again, it's not for everybody, but there is so much freedom in applying and learning some of these, really timeless tools to addressing these things, that people like you and me can come out the other end from these tough experiences and actually succeed. We can feel grounded, and we can feel that we've gotten to a place where we are no longer dealing with those things in the same way, or we can at least look at them objectively and remove the fear and all of this sort of drama and panic around it, and this like racing out of control by simply understanding what's going on. And again, a functional, natural solution for this that doesn't have any of the addiction or the side effects of pharmaceuticals, is such a welcome addition. especially when there's so few things out there that really, really work or that are rooted in science.
Yeah, we call it the T minus moments, and and I'll explain that a little bit. But just to touch quickly on your other point, really, I see it as crisis versus chronic management, right? So pharmaceuticals, amen. My life would be measurably more horrible if I didn't have pharmaceuticals. I've had 13 surgeries. So I've used a lot of pharmaceuticals in crisis management, right? But the problem is it starts to bleed into chronic. And to your point, it's not a crisis if you're doing it all the time. It's something that has to be managed from the root, and that's the problem. So that's why this solution really gets me jazzed on the fact that, you know what, I'm going to have a podcast. So my T minus moment is T minus 20 minutes before the podcast. I'm going to grab a 0 to B plus energy because I need to be jazzed, but I need to be present. I can't have the outside world slipping into my brain because there's a lot of stress and certain things right now. I want to be with you, right? I have a tough conversation. Well, you know what? I'll grab the 0 dB original about 15 minutes before just to downregulate. So we call them these T minus moments where we can reach for something, to your point, not pharmaceutical, natural. There's a lot of other components that are energizing, that are very healthy. We have B vitamins in there. We have guarana, yerba mate, beetroot. We have magnesium. So there's a lot in here that you can feel good about. And that's why I'm so excited to get people other options, because in anxiety, when you look at pharma, well, I would assume, and the last time I checked, I would assume 3 of the top 5 drugs that are prescribed are anti-anxiety drugs, right? I think it's about that. I think people do need a solution. And look, if your whole family died in a plane crash, that's not a 0 dB moment, right? You know, there is a time and a place for everything.
Yes, well said. And that's important. I think people often throw the baby out with the bathwater and they think it's either absolutely no pharma ever and it has that there's always some natural thing, or vice versa. And, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of cause and effect reasons for why our system evolved in this way, why the medical system is the way it is, and people are trained to certain things. But there's a lot of positive things about that as well. So we want to be very careful not to dismiss 100%. That. Because, again, as you said, the crisis management part of it, they can be extremely helpful on a short-term basis as well. But it really is eye-opening when you learn, especially the root systems behind what's causing your anxiety and your issues. And then you can see firsthand what something like 0 dB can do with just natural means, non-pharmaceutical, just plant extracts, but that's selected for a very specific effect, can do to just take that edge off in a very similar way to what a pharmaceutical could do, but without all those side effects. And that's a bit of a holy grail. Again, people have been looking for this kind of thing, and maybe they've tried some herbs, they've tried some other things, they've tried magnesium and other things, and they're like, yeah, helps a little bit, but it's not quite as precise as something like this. So I think you are doing a great service with your product for people out there who are looking for something like this in such an easy to consume way, right? As a beverage.
Yeah, it's a great, I love the form factor of beverages. I come from the beverage world, so I understand them. And it becomes an occasion. I told you when you and I chatted, I've written a blog about my French press, right? Now I have one of those machines. I actually have 2 of them that can make coffees fairly quickly. But there's something about the process, the occasion of making a French press coffee. You boil the water, right? You steep it and, you let it. So there's an occasion. So with the beverage, that's how I see it. I see it as an occasion. It's almost when you're drinking it, you can just take your pause, you don't take any pauses during the day. Use this as your cue to a pause. Like, I'm sure you've read all the habit books. There's a million of them now, but you have your habit, you have your routine, you have your reward. Well, I use this as a cue to just drop everything and take some time to have the beverage. So there's a lot of ways that I use the beverage as a catalyst. And that's why that form factor worked really well. And we're going to come out with other form factors that are going to touch on things like we talked about earlier, looking at shots and looking at ways that people can incorporate this when they're traveling and, maybe a quicker solution. We're also looking at that as well.
I think that's really exciting because I love your concept of this occasion that you could drink a 0DB as just in the way that you might, as you said, make a French press coffee, or someone might really take the time to brew a very special tea. And, the thousands of years of human, ritual around preparing a very special beverage and then slowly but consistently enjoying that beverage. There's actually some sayings related to meditation and Buddhism around the practice of drinking your tea. Sort of, you want to drink it so slowly but consistently, not rushing it, but just enjoying the ritual of drinking it. It's very much what you're saying, and you can use 0DB in this sort of ritualistic, occasion-based way, as in a T-minus context. Like, I know I've got something stressful coming up. I know I want to be particularly grounded, and I want something natural to help me get to that place where I'm feeling unusually anxious today. I'm going to take a moment for myself, and I'm not just going to slam the 0DB like it's, a vitamin. I'm going to have a ritual around it. I'm going to enjoy it. It tastes great. That is so important in this holistic thinking around a beverage like this, which I love.
I love that concept, and it's very important to me that we have to slow down. And I know there's a slow movement in California, but I don't think there's a slow movement in Toronto.
Not yet.
Like, exactly. We're not as in tune with that. Everybody's behind California for certain things, but the slow movement makes a lot of sense to me. I'm looking at my turntable over there. How logical is a turntable? It's not logical at all. It's idiotic.
Right.
It takes, you have to change it every 20 minutes. Pardon me?
No, it's great. I mean, turntables and vinyl records, cassettes now, of course, are all the rage.
Right?
Yeah. Once again, which is awesome. I think
because it slows you down.
It does. And what a great analogy. I think people are finding in this age, for example, with music or drinks, this rushing. This with music, it's ephemeral streams. Just playing. There's too much music out there. Too many streams. All this on Spotify or whatever streaming platform you're on. We've lost something from the era of. Do you remember? If you're old enough to remember a cassette, buying a cassette or a vinyl of an album, the smell of the cassette or the album was so for me. Opening up the cassette and reading the liner art and seeing that paper insert and looking at the photos, the smell, believe it or not, was so much a part of the total experiential 100%. Enjoyment of that band's album. And cognitively, you associate the smell with the visual you saw on there, with the feel of the plastic casing, with the tape itself, and the same with vinyl. So it's so telling that we are returning in many ways to this palpable thing that we've lost since then. And I think this applies to the slow movement, right? Whether it's really craft coffee or tea or other things, food. I mean, there's something innately human and organic in our experience of things that we don't want to lose in this digital age.
Well, and at a physiological basis, it's extremely different than an experience without smell, and you focus on smell. The olfactory region, it essentially bypasses your reasoning brain.
Yes.
So as soon as you smell something, it's more of an emotional limbic response. So it takes you, to your point, back to how that felt. And that's the key. It's not a manufactured memory. It's oh my God, that first cassette I bought, Def Leppard, Pyromania. Actually, that's a lie. It was K-Tel, Chart Action. It was, She Blinded Me with Science was like the best song of that album. But it brings me back to that. Right?
I'm actually friends with Thomas Dolby. Thomas and I actually created a company together in the mid-90s, actually called Beatnik. Long story there. So, yes.
That's amazing. Well, that was the song that got me to buy my first cassette ever. She Blinded Me with Science. So I'm definitely old enough, Paul.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no,
but there's so many, see, again, you don't have to know all the little puts and takes from all these experiences, but it all means something, right? The pausing means something. The smelling, the experience, being present means something, right? What you're consuming, what you're doing means something, right? So when you put it all together, it's just a great opportunity to be an important and beneficial part of people's day-to-day.
Well said. And I'm so glad we touched on all of this because, I think it's so important to understand that the DNA, the whole basis from which you're creating a product like this has roots in honestly just the right kind of holistic thinking about this problem or why someone would need or use an augment like this for things like anxiety, as opposed to, again, just some kind of a marketing gimmick where someone says, hey, I see anxiety is blowing up as a problem. It's the number one problem now in the US, which is actually true. As you said, these drugs for anxiety are also the most prescribed of all things. So, it's easy to say, oh, I'm going to create a product for anxiety because it's hot. It's a problem. You are taking a truly ground up from the right, the right DNA, the right thinking, the right reasons behind it. And you're applying that science and that rigor and even doing the empirical testing with your scientists there. It's really the blending of both worlds perfectly, which just makes this totally unique. And it's also, by the way, we should say, because there's no cannabis in it, it's legal everywhere. So you're already shipping in Canada. You're you're starting to ship in the US now. Tell us a little bit about that. There's no cannabis, so there's no restrictions on the stuff. Where are you in the rollout? When can people get this? I mean, they can get it now on your website, but tell us more about that.
So people can consume it now on our website and on Amazon. And again, we have nothing to do with cannabis. So that's, again, it's an education, right, that people have to be taken through. So that's a conversation. But yeah, all of these plants are plants that have been consumed for decades. I love my niece and nephew to death. And, I would give them that before I'd give them a Gatorade, right? So these are plants we've known for a long time, and that's where we attach our safety to stuff that people have consumed. We feel good about it. We can ship cross-border. There's no issues that way. And we're going to be in retail in the next month, and then in the in Canada, and then in the US we're looking at mid to late next year. Obviously, there's a pandemic going on, so your best laid plans are kind of out the window. It used to be a year-long strategy plan. Then it was a 3-month strategy plan. Now, I think you're more looking like a month strategy plan rolling, right?
Absolutely. Well, hopefully the vaccine will be a game changer here, at least over time, if enough people get it and there's, and it works and it keeps working and all that. But it sounds like in the US, then you'd be actually in retail, maybe end of 2021 timeframe. Is that right?
Yeah.
But until then, you can buy it from your website, right?
Exactly.
So those
we
are
ship to the US.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And
so
we'll put the
the
website
link.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll put website link and all that stuff in the show notes here. And also on the Antidot website as well. But tell us just right now so people can actually hear it. What is the website URL for your...
So it's drinkzerodb.com.
drinkzerodb.com. Great.
It's not a command. It's more of a drinkzerodb.com. More of a, right?
Right.
You can imagine ZeroDB being an engineering term. You can imagine there were a few people hovering around that precious URL, zerodb.com. So yeah, drinkzerodb.com.
It's a really fitting name, and I love the audio analogy there. Actually, for anyone who has any background in audio, you immediately get the reference, right? Which is fantastic. But then when you hear the story too, you sort of really see even more why it's so fitting, and the T- concept and all of that. It really all fits well together. Let's touch briefly on your book, and you have a course coming out. So tell us how you're aligned with what you're doing. Tell us about the book.
Sure. Yeah, so the book is called Find Your Superhuman, and I had it here somewhere, but I don't need to show you. But Find Your Superhuman is a book. I call it life engineering. But really what it gets down to is, yes, it talks on nutrition, fitness, stress, talks about the physiology behind it. But again, I'm an engineer. So my approach to it was about, what do I need to know to understand enough to be able to solve my problem, right? And it really got down to creating the environment that is going to help me thrive. So less about what am I going to do to my body, and more about what's the environment I'm going to engineer for myself. And that's what life engineering is about. It's engineering an environment that's going to help you thrive. And that comes in all these different modalities. So that was what Find Your Superhuman was about, because truly, I believe everybody has a unique gift. And that's hard for people to understand because they think talent, they think, a great musician. But I believe our unique gift is our way to connect with people. And when we can quiet the noise in our life, right? When we can engineer that proper environment, we can better feel those connections that are going to serve us going forward. So that's why I wrote the book. And on the cover, weirdly enough, I had it here, but on the cover, it shows somebody flexing. That wasn't a gratuitous flex, but you see all the parts of the body, it's actually people. So when you better connect with yourself, you better connect with others. And that's our superhuman. As a collective, it's always been there. So that's what the book's about. And the course is super exciting. I'm doing it with a partner of mine, Andrew Parr, and it's the Quiet the Noise course. And this is super, super exciting because it has fundamentally changed my life forever. And it was a quote by Heraclitus, and it's character's fate. And so Heraclitus was a pre-Socratic philosopher, an Ionian philosopher. And he, with that quote, it could be character is destiny. Anyway, it's an ancient Greek, so you can, there's different translations, but I've always had a hard time having faith that things are going to turn out, right? And so I've always been trying to find ways to have faith. And some people put it in their mind and the power of intention. But for me, when I read character's fate, I said, you know what? That is exactly what I can focus on. And it clicked in my brain. I've been focusing so much on the external environment. I haven't focused on the internal environment. And the internal environment is my innate character. How am I showing up in my life? So when I met Andrew, it clicked. It was the inner growth, which is character, and the outer growth, which is choosing meaning. Not finding that one purpose, but choosing meaning in your friends, in your family, in your career, in your spirituality or connectedness, in awe. And it's truly the pillars of those two halves that create that yin and yang that help quiet the noise, because it gives you clarity. And clarity comes from really defining what that inner environment is and what that external environment is. So I know that's a mouthful, but I'm pretty jazzed about it because it's changed my life.
That is, of course, that is a perfect fit for the Antidot audience. We're big fans of Stoicism. So the Stoics and the core precepts behind Stoicism, literally, you just articulated that. And in basically the stuff that you can control, separating that from can't control. And you actually can't control most things, it turns out, in life in the world. And that's actually not a scary thing. It's quite the opposite. It's quite empowering because, as you said, your character, your choices, your sort of reasoned choices that one can make, those are really, among the few things that you can control. And so why not choose to focus on that, as you said, how you show up, and realize that you can't control the things that really most things outside your control. And by your own reasoned choices and focusing on your character, you actually have the best odds of succeeding and actually faring well, paradoxically, in the stuff that you can't control. So it's so empowering, and I'm not surprised that you were drawn to the wisdom of that period and some of the thinkers of that period. There's also a lot of great wisdom from Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, all the other Stoics as well, and many others in lots of other parts of history as well, not just the Stoics. But all these central themes around separating what you can control and can't control is a core precept that is so underappreciated, surprisingly, in our modern world. You think these ideas have been around for thousands of years, and so it's just amazing to see that people were dealing with the same crap back then, right? They had to spend a lot of time thinking to work through these. probably a lot more thinking than we do now, because now we're consumed by the news feed, social media,
Of course.
dopamine addiction, screens, endless Netflix. So it's really not surprising that there's just been this massive explosion of anxiety and fear and existential doubt and worry these days, right? Because you're not on a rock anymore, sitting there pondering life with nothing else to do, with no screens anymore.
And I'm sure it wasn't all roses back then, but they definitely didn't have the distractions. You go back, Socrates, we're talking 500 BC. So you're talking 2,500 years, right? So when we talk about root cause, looking at the root cause, when you look at going way back on the same issues we had from a psychological perspective, right? From a societal perspective, when you go way back, those are such empirical sources of suffering in our lives, right? This wanting a situation to be different.
Yes.
It's inherently where all the suffering comes from.
Yes.
Be it anxiety, be it regret. We want a situation to be different. So when you talk about control, well, what happens is you say, okay, I can control this. And that's the practice. Okay, I'm going to will myself to do these things. Boom. It's very empowering, right? These are the things I can't control. These are the things I can influence. But in all cases, I'm choosing my response. I'm choosing to let go. And that ends the pathology. Now, I'm not there, obviously. There's probably 5 people on earth who are truly there. But you know what? I know I'm doing what I need to do to get closer to truly feeling like I'm letting go. You can say you're letting go, but to truly feel it, right? To truly, no matter what comes at you, no matter when that flood comes, I truly believe that I'm going to be okay. And that's a feeling. That's not a reasoning brain. That's a feeling brain. So, I'm on the path, Paul, and pretty jazzed about it. Andrew and I had a 7-hour session yesterday, and you get lost in these things. I don't know about you, but I get lost in them because, all the tumblers are falling into place, right? And it just starts to really make sense.
Absolutely. And, I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said that the root of all suffering, honestly, really is that you want something to be different than it is. I mean, literally, that is, if there were to be a root cause behind all anxiety and sort of existential sort of grief, it is being in a situation and wanting reality in some way to be different from how you're experiencing it.
Yeah.
And it's funny, these core feelings around that kind of anxiety have been around humans. This is not a recent thing, right? As you said, the Stoics felt this, they wrote about it, they thought about it. This has been going on for eons. It's not new. And so how incredibly empowering to realize that if that's the root of this, how can I even take baby steps, right, to get closer? You said that you're not there yet. Well, you know what? As you said, 5 people probably on earth are all the way there, right? It takes practice. It takes time. You've got to be patient with yourself, right? If you can even make incremental steps to get even a little closer there, that sort of unpacking that awareness every day a little bit, catching yourself, asking yourself, stepping back from your thoughts, looking objectively on it. You know what? This is where the science comes in of neuroplasticity. Your brain's ability to rewire itself is very, very real. It's proven by science. The fact that you're no longer stuttering, I'm not either generally. You are so articulate. In fact, I was thinking as you were speaking earlier, it's amazing this guy ever stuttered. Like, really? Listen to how articulate, how spoken he is.
It was incessant.
Right. Well, so, it shows you the power of what your own brain can do and overcome, and how your brain can rewire itself. So as you said, by taking little baby steps and getting a little closer every day, you are building new neuronal pathways in your brain and you are actually changing your reality, because your whole experience of reality is literally experienced through your brain. So you are literally changing the world, meaning how you perceive the world, by doing this each day. And I can't imagine a more powerful thing. And I love that this is the whole basis of care and thinking behind you creating something like a beverage product, right? People might otherwise think, oh, it's a beverage. It's a marketing thing. How it's so clearly not in your case, which I think people really, really appreciate.
Yeah, no, actually, you talked about 0 dB before. 0 dB doesn't mean a vacuum. It doesn't mean zero sound. Actually, it's a logarithmic scale. So 0 actually means 1. So where you are, ostensibly, in the Maldives, that is 0 decibel. It's a reference point for peace. You have that ambient hum of the source energy of life, but nothing else. It's when you're totally at peace. And it's such a beautiful, anyway, I'm biased, Paul. I can't talk about these things. I love everything about the brand. Like, I could talk about the brand for 6 hours, because when you peel every layer, there's a reason for everything. It's not just, we didn't do this for that. We didn't do this for that for marketing reasons. It's all part of this system that interconnects with the content and what just gets me jazzed, right?
Well, we are so honored, honestly, to be to help get the early word out about what you're doing. And I think what you've shared beyond just the drink itself, the wisdom you shared, your example, your interests, I think have probably helped people as much or more than even the drink may, which is awesome. So great. And I think that really shows the purity of what you're doing and how this is so different from sort of a beverage products company. I can't keep stressing that point enough, because again, people more than ever should be wary of marketing gimmicks, and especially things around, calming, supplements and anxiety drinks and stuff like that. So I really, really wanted to make very, 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 very clear about that. And it's a huge thank you, I think, from all of us who are going to benefit from what you're doing, both with the drink and the science behind it, and the thinking around it, which I think is just equally important. So next up, we got to get the drink in people's hands, and we got to get them to think and act along the topics that we just discussed.
Yeah, it's gonna be exciting. Actually, check that. Exciting is not in my vocabulary because it projects me in the future. It's going to be interesting next year, because I can't wait to get that content out there. The video library, the course. We have a book and a journal coming out to help walk you through the year. Like, I'm super jazzed at how they're going to play together. The catalyst to give you the time to really do the work. I'm super jazzed about it, energized by it. I can't wait to interact with people.
Jazz is a great word. It sounds like much more of things working together in a positive way in concert to
Amen.
Back to then excited, which is sort of, right.
Amen.
Great. Well, we will also be happy to, via the Antidot website and everything we're doing, help amplify what you're doing there with all your upcoming content. And also we'll put links to things in the show notes, and we'll definitely want to do a part 2 with you, especially, after we get to try the drink here ourselves and
can't wait.
You can see what happens. And also just as you get more of your content out there, let's work together on helping people learn this stuff and even make those little incremental baby steps in their lives towards getting to this 0 dB place that you're looking at right now on my screen.
Yeah, I can't wait. I honestly, Paul, I can't wait to show you. I'm kind of busting at the seams just to get this to you, because I think you're going to dig it, just the way it feels and how it's going to connect with you. You seem like we just met. You seem like a very genuine cat, and I think you're going to dig it. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Gary. Well, we're doing this for the right reasons. This is not a profit motive kind of thing at all. We're sharing wisdom here. We think it's important, especially for those of us who have tried other solutions, especially the pharma path and things like that, and have gone through some ups and downs in life and come out the other end a lot wiser. Like, what better honor than to share some of this learning? I know you have been through the exact same thing, which is awesome. So Gary LeBlanc, thank you so much for being on the show. Again, we'll put links to what Gary's doing in the show notes, and we'll definitely look forward to doing a part 2 with you, Gary.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Paul, and we'll talk to you soon for sure.
Thanks again. Be well. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Antidot Podcast. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And also go to the Antidot website for the latest breakthroughs, instantly calming quick reliefs, the free Antidot newsletter, and much, much more at theantidot.com. That's www.theantidot, without an E at the end, .com. On the Antidot website, you'll find everything from little known evidence-based supplements, natural foods that are calming and relaxing and great for anxiety and worry and fear, getting out of your own head and for your overall health. You'll find cutting-edge cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, ancient wisdom from Stoicism and Buddhism, and a whole lot more. There's nothing quite like the Antidot out there, and it's all completely free. We'd also love to hear from you. Suggestions, topics for upcoming episodes, guests you'd like to see on the show. Email us anytime at newsletter@theantidot.com. Medical disclaimer. The information on this podcast and the Antidot website is for information purposes only. It should not be construed as medical advice. You should always work with your doctor or practitioner on anything related to your health or medical needs.